Brought to you by...
All too often, we head into sequels with the expectation that we are being delivered a carbon copy of its predecessor. We expect the same format, the same journey, and the same outcome, with different characters. However, every now and then, a film turns that concept on its head and delivers us something new and far from the path originally forged by those that came before. Hello friends, and welcome back to ETF. Today we follow up the found footage origins of the Hangman, as an acting student encounters a malevolent spirit after participating in a viral challenge. We open this unexpected sequel with a group of rambunctious college students scaring each other with live streaming some spooky attempt to contact spirits, before reading a copy of the Gallows play. The film then suddenly shifts out of the world of found footage into traditional cinematic filmmaking, a moment that made me so happy to see, considering it broke the bounds of what I was expecting to see in a sequel to a found footage flick that ultimately failed. This for me opened up the possibilities tenfold, giving the Executioner character a chance to shine and earn his place as a supernatural horror icon. Unfortunately, the film doesn't quite disregard its roots, working in the live streaming YouTube culture throughout its cast of characters. This film opts for a high color contrast, which further distances itself from the cold, dark, sad look of its predecessor, which somewhat gives the film more of a teen dramedy vibe than a horror film. Early on, the filmmakers make it a point to place our protagonist center frame, even center stage, drawing the focus on her directly. I think in an attempt to emphasize her isolation as the new girl in school, and having just embarrassed herself in front of her new drama class. Something I didn't like was the fact that Anna gets a random recommendation from a YouTube account that has no views or follows that leads her to the stage play. It didn't feel organic in any way, and stood basically as a MacGuffin for how the plot gets underway. It is explained later in the film, but it just didn't sit right. There are some fun, unnoticeable moments here and there that showcase the hooded executioner standing in the background, reflected in mirrors and such after Anna begins reading the stage play in her room. The approach that this one takes to the source material is very liberal, mostly reworking the core concepts to explore a narrative. The stage play itself becomes a conduit to the horrors it invokes, by somehow casting a hold over Anna, drawing her into it and even consuming her at moments. Personally, the interactions of the characters are a little too cheesy for my taste, making it hard to invest myself in their budding relationships. This film takes its time to try and build up to the scare elements, which could come across as dull to some casual audiences. The writing throughout this film felt so incredibly uninspired. Everything happens so matter-of-factly and feels like it was written quickly. Honestly, I wouldn't doubt it if the actors just had very little to go on. The film makes a lot of use of shrouded silhouettes in the backgrounds of various shots, making you wonder if what we are seeing is the executioner waiting in the deep bokeh of the frame. This was an element that I personally enjoyed. It held my interest throughout many of these prolonged scare sequences. It was these elements that turned an otherwise mundane supernatural slasher into something a little more interesting and a little more enjoyable. It also employs the reuse of visual gags to build its suspense, so that when you see the same shots again, you know that something terrifying is coming this time. The majority plays out much like your standard supernatural possession story, which definitely makes things go around more interesting than the first one's more traditional paranormal activity style ghost story. Something in this one that spoke out to me was the idea of a protagonist that has no one in her life that believes in her ability to succeed at the one thing that she wants to be. I'm not saying that I have no one that believes in me, but I definitely understand what it's like when no one understands your passions and doesn't really put stock in your creativity. I just found it somewhat relatable. I did think that the idea of Anna's sister being tormented as well was a cool element that helped break up the story a bit. It allowed the effects of her interaction with the stage play to bleed into the world around her and infest not only her, but the house itself, since that is where she first read from it. The film chooses to use some wildly overdramatic lighting throughout the piece, harsh reds and blues that contrast each other, which goes well given the theatrical nature of the narrative. Poetically, the story chooses to give Anna her chance at her dream, while trading it for the life of her more successful older sister. The filmmakers also do make use of the events of the first film as something one of the characters comes across while researching the Gallows. Toward the climax, things take a turn that, again, I wasn't expecting. Suddenly, the hangman becomes a very tangible person who has been sending her videos, actually more than one. They each sport supernatural teleporting abilities, which lead me to believe that they were those who were previously consumed by the Gallows. I won't spoil the ending here for those who wish to immerse themselves in this B-movie plot, but I will say that it's not one that I can highly recommend. I do appreciate what the film was attempting to be, and how it differed itself from the very basic source material. However, it was done in such an overly cheesy fashion that it left me with a dull aftertaste. I'm giving The Gallows Act 2 a D. Some more general audiences may find this one enjoyable. However, I feel that even they might see the strangeness in how the performances here play out. If you're a seasoned filmgoer, I would probably stop at the first act.